2 of her trip to Greece many, many years ago. Please join me in welcoming the hardest working president in Toastmasters, Kaaren Henderson.
Thank you, Andrew. And just a note to the timer, I had to change the time to 10 to 12 minutes. With that, if your travel guidebook ever tells you, whatever you do, don't do that. Please follow my story and make sure you take heed of that guidance. It all happened on my international trip to Greece. I was in a week-long conference, and it was the first time I had ever traveled by myself. I was a little bit scared, but I dreamed that I would meet up with someone there, a woman, that would be a friendly traveling companion with some similar goals, and that we could do the rest of the trip together. It was the last day, the last hour of this conference. And lo and behold, I met Mary Jane. She had the same dreams of traveling Greece and wanted to go to exactly the same places. We joined each other in Santorini and had a lovely 5 days there. It was time to head back for the mainland and Delphi and other sites. When we hit a little snag, I hadn't realized, because I only talked to her for a half an hour before getting in this trip together, that she was on a very tight budget, because she had gifted herself with a year-long trip around the world where she got 12 round-trip tickets to anywhere that she wanted to go in her own timing. Well, that cost a pretty penny, I'm sure, and therefore she needed to really squeeze the rest of them. I was hoping she would stretch her budget a little bit, but when it came to how we were going to get back to Athens, we disagreed. The guidebook said, whatever you do, don't take the night ferry to Athens. And if your budget is so restricted that you must take the all-night ferry, whatever you do, don't book a cabin in the front of the boat in the lower sections. Well, that was all her budget would allow. Reluctantly, we booked the trip. As we were walking up the ramp into the boat, into the ferry, I hear a voice behind me. Would you like some help with your suitcase? It was a masculine voice. I turned, there's a very tall, I think he was Russian guy, and he smiled the most horrific smile. A lot of his teeth were black, and the other ones were missing. I was quite sure that his mother must have been a tooth fairy. Well, I turned down his help and scurried away as quickly as I could. When we got to our cabin and stepped inside, we stepped into 5 inches of ankle-deep water sloshing around. Okay, the guidebook was right. The boat started, and within a half an hour, my roommate was turning green. She was really getting seasick. She pleaded with me, Kaaren, could you please go find the purser and maybe convince him he should give us another room? And if that fails, please get me some Dramamine. I went off in search of, I didn't quite know who. I'm wandering the halls, sort of sloshing around myself, looking for someone who can help me and help my roommate, Mary Jane. I come across the purser, the guy who had checked us in. And I told him of our plight, and he said, well, follow me. There's a desk over here, and I'll see what I can do to find if there's any place else you can be. He tries to log onto the computer, and he's having all kinds of trouble. He can't get the internet to come up. He can't seem to find it. I'm standing there, and I become a wallflower because 15 minutes later, he's still not on this darn computer. Well, then he he gives me a very nice smile. And he says, well, and he points to his knee. He says, why don't you just take a seat right here? And I'm thinking, well, if I end up sitting on your lap, you can be sure that that is all that is going to happen. And so I take a seat on his lap, and lo and behold, he gets the computer running, finds out there's no other room that we could possibly have. And just as he's giving me that news, the captain of the ship walks around the corner and he stands up, throwing me down to the floor. He literally dumped me. I was so embarrassed that I rushed off and started looking for some Dramamine. I find my way finally to the dining room area, and there's a little sundry machine. It has Dramamine. Great. Only problem is I didn't have exactly the right change to put in the machine. I'm feeling a little frustrated. All of a sudden, I hear that familiar masculine voice, and he says, may I help you? I turn, and you guessed it, it's the Russian man. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in this place all by myself with somebody who tried to flirt with me earlier. No. I get the Dramamine and say, oh, I've got to get back to my roommate. I left him so quickly that you would have thought that I was some sort of ghostly apparition. When I got back to the room, my roommate, Mary Jane, was so sick. It was a horrible night. We didn't sleep a wink. But fortunately, things got a little bit better, even though her budget forced me to give up my ideas of this nice air-conditioned tour bus to get to Delphi and the other sites. We ended up going on the local buses, taking a lot longer to get there and a whole lot less comfort. I really hadn't planned on the bargain basement tour. Well, we had a good time anyway, and when it was time to head back for Athens, we had let ourselves get very, very low on money. No problem. ATM the next morning, and then the train to Athens. I look when we get to the ATM and discover that it won't respond to us. It won't do anything. I thought, well, maybe that ATM is broken. We go to the next ATM, same story, nothing. Third ATM, nothing. Okay, well, we've got to make it to the train station or we'd miss our train. We get there and we're able to buy our tickets with our credit cards, thankfully. What we didn't realize was that we had bought standing only tickets because that was all that was left. It was a 6-hour train ride to get to Athens, and we had to stand the whole way. Exhausted when we got to Athens, there were only 2 taxi cabs in front of the station. And this was, of course, before Venmo. Nobody was interested in taking a credit card. And we were in a complete panic. There wasn't a hotel in sight. Like, where were we going to stay? Oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden, I had a flash of insight. No CD park for us with possibly a Russian. I had made a connection with a lovely woman that lived in Athens. And I had her phone number. We'd exchanged contacts. I called her. Oh my gosh, she volunteered to come and pick us up and put us up in her apartment that night. What a rescue. Better yet, she loaned my roommate the money to take a cab to the airport at 4 a.m. that morning, and I would go to the ATM with her the next day and reimburse her. Well, what an incredible gift she gave us. I can say, whatever you do, do that. Her kindness saved the day. And as I was flying back on the airplane, I kept thinking of that quote from A Streetcar Named Desire by Blanche Dubois. She says, I have always depended on the kindness of strangers. My thought is, whatever you do, do that. Be kind. And if it's kindness to a stranger, either a kind word or deed, all the better. you might just change their lives and yours. Mr. Toastmaster.